Oh God, when everything is spiraling out of control, when only 10 people have turned up to your key speech, when you decide to accidentally post pictures, look at this, of your husband having an argument with the nanny on your wedding day, then what more is there to do than yet another disastrous advertising post making zero sense, but showing that you are, these days, pretty damn crazy.
The amount of photos that she put just made her really look like kind of an insane narcissist. There were a lot of just her. And that one photo that you were just talking about is such a bad mistake. Well, it's interesting because you would have thought that somebody who had been there on that day, Serena, Oprah, the Clooneys, Priyanka Chopra.
Yes, she's another one.
Even Elton John, who she actually put a picture of him up. The only celebrity that she put a picture of, because of course she wants to tie herself again to Diana. None of them said, "What a great day," or "Wow, what a magical wedding," or "I still think about it." You know, no one said anything. And it is just getting quite sad. And again, you kind of are like, oh girl, knock it off. Like, it's getting very cringy.
24 photographs, 1 Elton John, 0 family. That's what Meghan Markle chose to drop for her 8th wedding anniversary, and the internet went straight to work. Daily Mail's Alison Boshoff was sitting in Cannes when the carousel hit. She watched it, then she started counting. So did Tom Sykes, veteran royal correspondent who had just landed back from Geneva that same morning. 2 seasoned journalists, 1 Instagram post, same conclusion, 24 photographs. Personally curated by Meghan, posted to 4.5 million followers. Her own version of the day she married into the British royal family, and it tells a very specific story. Almost every single shot is solo. Several show her dancing alone in that Stella McCartney reception gown, arms raised, nobody beside her. No Doria, no Charles, no royal family member anywhere in sight. Just Meghan, over and over, in her own carefully selected highlight reel. One recognizable face from the 2018 guest list made the cut, Elton John.
I think it's really interesting because she's showing all of the celebrity friends, right, who usually, and she proves it, post tributes all the time to other celebrities, right? Like they Oprah or Gayle King. Look at all of the people who they love celebrating, love talking about their big moments.
One picture tucked into a corner of a reception shot. And even that comes with a catch. Per Boshoff's reporting, Elton has stayed connected over the years, but as she noted, it's a Harry relationship, not a Harry and Meghan relationship. That one face isn't even really Meghan's to claim. One man, and he belongs to Harry. So this breaks it down exactly the way Boshoff did, block by block. Who made the cut? Who got left out entirely? And then something Harry himself said 7 months ago on an American comedy podcast. Because what he said about social media that October doesn't sit comfortably next to what his wife just posted. Here's what Meghan did post. 24 images, dropped in the early hours of Tuesday morning Pacific time, most previously unseen. A corkboard-style collage opens the carousel, then individual photos follow. Meghan in the Givenchy ceremony gown, standing alone in a hallway, looking down. Meghan in the backless Stella McCartney reception gown, dancing solo, arms above her head. A kiss. Another kiss. At least 6 different solo shots, various corners of the day.
I know it's difficult to be shocked by how low Meghan will go, but I was still shocked by the merching of the wedding for a candle. Honestly, I was. Because, you know, the difference with this, Paula, is that at least with the children, I guess you can say, well, it's up to them now what they do. I mean, this was a wedding paid for by us, the British taxpayer, and paid for by the British royal family. And merching the wedding, to me, I always knew that'd go there eventually. I'm shocked that I've done it so early. It's almost like she was begging people to post about this, to talk about this, and the silence was utterly damning in my view.
Various poses, various stages of getting ready. Harry does appear, roughly a quarter of the frame count, but the framing says everything. This is her day, told her way, and almost everyone else has been quietly edited out. Now for what's missing, because according to Boshoff, that's the real story. Every wedding album is a curation. The photos you choose tell the world who you still claim. The ones you leave out tell a completely different story. And this carousel left out a lot. Doria Ragland walked Meghan into St. George's Chapel on the 19th of May, 2018. She wore a duck egg blue Oscar de la Renta dress. She sat alone in the front pew on the bride's side, the only Markle family member in that building. She flew in from Los Angeles. Photographers caught her weeping through the ceremony, then laughing at the reception. She danced, and on the chapel steps, she held Meghan's hand. In the 24 photographs Meghan personally curated for her 8th anniversary, Doria does not appear. Not in the corkboard collage, not in the candid getting ready shots. Not anywhere. Boshoff said it carefully. So it's worth saying carefully here too. The photographs exist. Official wedding photographer Alexei Lubomirsky shot several formal portraits of Meghan with Doria released publicly in 2018. Meghan has full access to that entire archive. She chose none of them. In the version of her wedding day posted to 4.5 million followers, her own mother is nowhere to be seen.
Looking back at all the pictures that she posted, I think some of them we maybe have seen before, but some of them not quite so much. And there's one picture in particular that kind of got to me, and that was when they're like close to smooching and she's like grabbing his face and he looks drunk as a skunk, like with his mouth open. It's like super awkward. I was like, why are you sharing this picture?
A mother photographed weeping with joy at her daughter's wedding should appear somewhere in that daughter's anniversary post. 8 years later, 24 photos deep, Doria's absence is not a privacy call. This was Meghan's own carousel. Meghan made every single choice. This is the same woman whose Netflix special told us repeatedly how close she is to her mother. The same woman whose Sussex royal launch positioned Doria as the moral centre of the entire family. The same woman who, in her own Vanity Fair cover story, called her mother her best friend. On the day she chose to share her wedding album with the world, the 8th anniversary of the moment Doria walked her down that aisle, Doria didn't make the cut. A wedding anniversary post with no mother in it is exactly the kind of thing people notice. And it doesn't stop there, because this carousel gets even more revealing when you look at what was left out on purpose. King Charles III, then the Prince of Wales, walked Meghan down the second half of that aisle, a personal act of kindness after her own father pulled out days before the wedding. Royal historians called it one of the most unusual gestures of welcome the institution had extended to a new royal in decades. A man stepping in for a stranger's daughter on her wedding day, the British press called it the moment she was finally accepted into the family. He is not in the carousel.
It was really striking, Paula, that on this anniversary, which clearly none of us thought was significant, but Harry and Meghan did, there was not one tribute from anyone else. And so they're the ones invading their own privacy. And it links, Paula, with what you have been reporting to Alison Boshoff in the Daily Mail in recent weeks about how virtually every A-lister at the wedding in some way, Paula, has turned or at least chosen to freeze themselves out.
She has censored the royal family from it. It's as if the royal family weren't there.
Queen Elizabeth II attended, she approved the venue, she approved the carriage procession, she sat through the ceremony, and that very morning she granted Harry the Sussex dukedom itself. She is not in the carousel either. Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, attended together. Their children were in the wedding party. None of it made the cut. Tom Sykes, the Daily Beast's royal correspondent with 15 years on the beat, put it bluntly. He wrote that the Sussexes have squandered every last drop of goodwill through precisely this kind of stunt. The performative solemnity, in his words, undercut entirely by reflexive vanity. And he's not wrong. What Meghan published is not a private wedding album lovingly shared with the world. It's a curated brand asset, and that brand made a very deliberate decision to erase the British royal family from her own royal wedding anniversary post. That is not an oversight. That is a choice. A bride who edits her in-laws out of her own wedding memorial has decided what she wants people to remember and what she wants to forget. So who did make the carousel? One face. Elton John. And even that, per Boshoff's reporting, is not really Meghan's relationship to claim it's Harry's. Here's where the story gets almost comical. George and Amal Clooney attended that 2018 wedding. Per Boshoff's reporting, they reportedly told other guests they had never actually met the bride or groom before that day.
Things haven't been good for some time between Doria and Meghan Markle, have they? It's been very obvious in Doria's couple of brief appearances on Meghan's media projects that she's just not interested. She doesn't like being dragged into the spotlight and used in the same way.
They were there to lend celebrity to the occasion, nothing more. Last week, they turned up at King Charles's charity event, not Meghan's anniversary post. Their loyalty was always to the institution, never to the brand. Oprah came to the wedding too. 3 years later, she got the interview she wanted. Transaction completed. No loyalty, just business. Oprah has been quiet on the Sussexes ever since. David and Victoria Beckham attended that 2018 wedding too, and per Boshoff's reporting, they won't go anywhere near the Sussexes now. They've been photographed repeatedly with William and Catherine instead. Serena Williams was reportedly the last real holdout, Meghan's actual friend, the one who genuinely stuck around. And even Serena, per the most recent reporting, has cooled off. That is the social ledger of someone whose anniversary carousel contains one Elton John and a lot of solo shots. And before anyone says celebrities don't post tributes to someone else's anniversary, that's not the point. The Clooneys made it to King Charles's party just last week. They're out there. They're taking photographs with people. They're simply choosing different people. Boshoff's reporting isn't about who failed to post a tribute. It's about who Meghan herself chose to include and exclude from her own version of that day. That ledger reads like a brand that burned through its connections, a wedding album running on grievance instead of genuine memory. 8 years in, and the evidence is right there in the frame. Count. Now, there's one more piece of this story that needs attention. It doesn't come from this week. It comes from October 2025, 7 months ago, when Prince Harry sat down with American comedian Hassan Minhaj on his podcast.
I looked at the pictures of Harry, right, of her dancing with Harry, her suction kissing him, and I tell you what, he just looked like a little rag doll in her arms. You know, she clearly was director of operations on that day, and you could almost see from those pictures this poor innocent ginger guy, a lamb to the slaughter, being sucked into Meghan's master plan.
They covered a lot of ground. American citizenship, his accent, the strangeness of raising children in California. Then Minhaj asked what they planned to do when their kids eventually asked for mobile phones. Harry didn't hesitate. He was cautious, hesitant, deeply uncomfortable with the idea of his children anywhere near social media. On that same podcast, Harry called the people behind these platforms evil, wicked people who farm our children's mindset and market it for themselves. That clip made modest waves inside royal watching circles for about 48 hours, then settled into the archive the way most podcast moments do. It's back this week, because of what his wife just posted. This Tuesday, Meghan dropped that carousel of 24 wedding photographs to 4.5 million followers. Inside that post, a clip of their children singing happy anniversary to their mother, their faces, their voices, posted publicly. She also showed off the bronze penguin Harry picked out as her 8th anniversary gift, bronze being, as the post helpfully reminded everyone, the traditional material for the 8th anniversary year, symbolizing lifelong partnership. The man who called social media platforms evil for exploiting children, his own children, are now content inside his wife's anniversary post. The version of their marriage this carousel sells you is the one they want you to see. The version Harry described on that podcast, cautious, deeply uncomfortable with social media, is the exact opposite of how his wife operates professionally. Both versions cannot be true at the same time, and in just 15 days, on the 6th of June, there's going to be yet another version of this marriage on display. Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son and the late Queen's eldest grandson, will marry Harriet Sperling at All Saints Church in Kemble. King Charles is invited, Queen Camilla is invited, William and Catherine are invited.
The best man, William, has become the invisible man. He's not in any of Meghan's pictures, nor is Catherine, the Princess of Wales, nor is the late Queen Elizabeth or the late Prince Philip, Anne, Edward, you name it, they're not there, nor are any of the galaxy of stars who went there as well, who attended that wedding. So she's censored everybody out of these great raft of pictures, and it's just her, mainly her, and a little bit of Harry.
Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie are both making their return to active royal life through this wedding, quietly photographed at engagements with the King's office over the last 2 weeks. The Sussexes are not on the guest list. Multiple outlets are reporting it. Peter Phillips' team has not denied it. And that silence is its own kind of answer. Think about what that means. This is not some distant cousin's backyard gathering. This is a senior royal wedding, a Phillips wedding, a direct line to the late Queen herself. The kind of event where the guest list is not just a formality, it is a statement. Every name on it means something. Every name left off it means something too. And the Sussexes are left off it. Peter Phillips has never been one for drama. He has largely stayed out of the public wars that defined the Sussex years. He is not a man who makes loud statements, which is exactly why this one lands so hard. You don't have to shout to make a point. Sometimes you just quietly don't send the invitation and let the world do the math. The family has been doing its own counting, and the numbers are not adding up in Harry and Meghan's favour. Not this week. Not with this carousel, not with this pattern that keeps repeating itself no matter how many bronze penguins or anniversary posts get published. Because here is what keeps getting overlooked in the conversation about the carousel. It is not just one post. It is not just one anniversary. It is a pattern that has been building for years, and the 24 photographs published this Tuesday are simply the latest and clearest version of it. Every major moment in the Sussex public story follows the same blueprint. A carefully curated image goes out. The image tells one story. The gaps in the image tell another. And then the people who were supposed to be in the frame, the ones who were physically present, who showed up, who played a role, find out they have been edited out. Not with any dramatic announcement. Not with any confrontation. Just quietly, digitally, gone.
I do think what was so interesting, though, about the whole wedding leak is that she's the only one now invading her own privacy, Paula. She is the only one. No other friends or family members had any desire to go back there on the wedding.
Doria was there on that aisle. She held Meghan's hand on those chapel steps. She wept through that ceremony. And 8 years later, when Meghan sat down to build her version of that day for 4.5 million followers, Doria did not make a single frame. That is not a small thing. That is a very specific kind of erasure, and it happens to be the same kind of erasure the British royal family has been experiencing through the Sussex public narrative for years. King Charles walked her down that aisle. The late Queen gave Harry his dukedom that morning. William and Catherine sat in that chapel. Their children stood in that wedding party. And none of them appear in the carousel Meghan chose to publish as her memorial of that day. The institution that gave her the platform, the title, the global audience she still trades on, scrubbed clean from her own wedding anniversary post. What makes this week different is that the contrast has never been sharper. Because at the exact same time Meghan was posting her solo carousel in California, the British royal family was quietly going about the business of being a family. Beatrice and Eugenie photographed at engagements. Charles hosting charity events with guests who actually show up. A Phillips wedding being planned with a guest list that reflects where loyalties actually sit. 2 very different pictures of what 2025 looks like for the people who were all in that chapel together in 2018. And then there is Harry. Because Harry is not a passive figure in this story. He is not just the man standing in roughly a quarter of the carousel frames. He is the man who, 7 months ago, on a public podcast, described social media platforms as run by evil, wicked people who farm our children's mindset and market it for themselves. His words, his interview, his October. And this Tuesday, his wife posted their children's faces and voices to 4.5 million followers as part of an anniversary content drop. The children Harry said he wanted to protect from exactly this kind of exposure turned into content, posted publicly, packaged alongside the bronze penguin and the Stella McCartney gown and the solo dancing shots. The contradiction is sitting right there in plain sight, and nobody in that household is addressing it. Now here is the question nobody in the royal commentary space seems willing to ask directly.
Most of their friends like Oprah, she has not been seen with Meghan Markle in years, right? Obviously she did the famous sit-down interview. I think a lot of their A-list friends have ditched them because they know there's no substance there. I think Meghan Markle played in Oprah's face. I think she sold her a bunch of lies, in my opinion. She told her mistruths. She told her half-truths to try and build a victim narrative. Who wants to hear some spoiled brat duchess complain about her time in the royal family? I'm so sorry you had to suffer and be in the royal family, sweetheart. I'm so sorry you got to live the fantasy millions of girls wish for every single day. I'm sorry you had to go to ribbon cuttings. I'm sorry you had to do a little cookbook. I'm sorry you had to wear fancy outfits and show up at charity events and go on trips that were paid for. So I'm so sorry to you.
Does Harry know? Does he approve? Is he sitting in Montecito watching his wife build her brand on the back of the values he publicly stated on that podcast and saying nothing? Or is there a conversation happening behind those Montecito walls that the carousel is not showing? Because one of those two options is deeply uncomfortable, and the other one is arguably worse. Think about what both scenarios actually mean. If Harry approved the post, if he sat beside Meghan, scrolled through the 24 frames, watched the clip of their children singing, and gave it the green light, then the man who called social media executives evil for exploiting children just handed his own children to that same machine, voluntarily, for an anniversary post. That is not a small contradiction. That is a values collapse happening in real time, dressed up in bronze penguin symbolism. And if Harry did not approve, if he found out the way 4.5 million other people did by watching it go live on a Tuesday morning, that raises an entirely different set of questions about what a unified partnership actually looks like inside those Montecito walls. The carousel sells togetherness. The bronze penguin symbolizes lifelong commitment. But a household where one partner posts the children publicly against the expressed values of the other is not the portrait of solidarity. The anniversary content is packaging. Either way, the gap between what Harry says and what his household does is now impossible to ignore. And it has been building for longer than just this week. Because this is not the first time the public Harry and the private Harry have told two completely different stories. This is a man who wrote an entire memoir about the importance of truth and then watched the British press fact-check it chapter by chapter. A man who gave an interview about media intrusion and then signed a Netflix deal that put cameras inside his family's life. A man who said he left the royal family to protect his mental health and his children and then spent the next 4 years doing press tours, podcast appearances, and public statements that kept him in the headlines every single week. The pattern is consistent. The stated values and the actual behavior have been running parallel for years without ever quite meeting, and the carousel is simply the latest and most visible example of that gap. Now let us talk about what happens on the 6th of June.
What are you going to do when your kids ask for a cell phone? Are you going to give them a phone? I mean, have you talked to Meghan about this? Because I've talked to my wife about this.
We talk about it a lot. And I think that, because of what we know now, we will be way more cautious and hesitant of allowing our kids to have access to social media. But the problem is so many parents don't have that awareness. Because in no logical, fair, ethical, moral world should a parent have to consider that this app that sits on the phone, which, by the way, having a phone for your kid is a really important thing.
Because that date is coming fast, and it is going to say something that no carousel can edit or curate or reframe. Peter Phillips, Princess Anne's son, the late Queen's eldest grandson, a man who has spent his entire public life deliberately staying out of the drama, is getting married at All Saints Church in Kemble, and the guest list reads like a map of where the royal family actually stands right now. King Charles will be there. Queen Camilla will be there. William and Catherine will be there. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, both of whom have been quietly rebuilding their public profiles through carefully managed engagements with the King's office over the last several weeks, will be there. Senior royals, working royals, the people who have chosen, quietly and consistently, to stay inside the institution rather than monetize their exit from it. The Sussexes are not on that guest list. Multiple outlets have confirmed it. Peter Phillips' team has not denied it. And in the world of royal communication, a non-denial from a Phillips is about as close to a confirmation as you are ever going to get. This is a man who does not play games with the press. He does not leak. He does not briefing war his way through tabloid cycles. He simply lives his life, and when his life does not include the Sussexes, that absence speaks for itself. And here is what makes this particular exclusion land differently than the others. Peter Phillips is not a palace official. He is not a courtier with an institutional agenda. He is not a tabloid editor running a campaign. He is family, actual family, the kind of family that sat in that same chapel in 2018 and watched Harry and Meghan get married. The kind of family that has no professional reason to exclude anyone, only personal ones. When the palace excludes the Sussexes from something, there is always a way to frame it as institutional politics. When the British press covers the rift, there is always a way to frame it as media hostility. But when a cousin simply does not send the invitation, when Peter Phillips plans his entire wedding around the people he actually wants in the room and the Sussexes do not make that list, there is no institution to blame. There is no press conspiracy to point to. There is just a man who knows his own family and has made his own quiet decision. That is the kind of social verdict that no amount of carousel curation can reverse. You cannot post your way back onto a guest list.
Happy anniversary to
And Papa! I love you.
Blow them!
No.
Blow them!
Yay!
Yeah!
Oh my god! This is when Mama and Papa, when we got engaged, we had a party with all of our friends and we said everyone wore an animal onesie and we were penguins. We were penguins because we're together for life.
You cannot drop 24 carefully selected photographs and manufacture the kind of trust that gets you invited to a family wedding in the Cotswolds. Either you are in someone's life or you are not. And on the 6th of June, the answer to that question is going to be very visible in the people standing inside that church and in the people who are not. Royal watchers have spent years trying to pinpoint the exact moment the Sussex story shifted from a sympathetic narrative to something more complicated. Some people mark it at the Oprah interview, some at the Netflix documentary, some at the memoir, some at the Invictus Games coverage, or the New York car chase story, or the moment the California security funding request became public. Different people draw the line in different places, but almost everyone agrees that a line exists and that it has been crossed. What this week did was make that line visible in a new way. Not through a dramatic statement, not through a legal filing or a press release or a bombshell interview, just through a carousel of 24 photographs and what those photographs chose to include and what they chose to leave out. The specific absences are what matter here. This was not a random selection. Meghan personally curated every single frame. She had access to the full archive, every candid, every formal portrait, every moment captured by Alexei Lubomirsky across the entire day. She made deliberate choices about what her version of that day would look like. And the version she chose to share with 4.5 million followers contains no mother, no king, no late queen, no William, no Catherine, no children from the wedding party, and one Elton John who, per reporting, belongs more to Harry's social world than to hers. That is not an accident. That is an editorial decision, and editorial decisions reveal priorities. The priorities this carousel reveals are the same priorities that have defined the Sussex public narrative since the beginning: self, brand, control of the story. An insistence on being the author of your own history, even when the history you are rewriting involves people who were physically present and emotionally invested in the original version.
This is like the ultimate snub to Harry and Meghan. This is a family wedding. This is something that in the past there would have been an expectation that someone so high up the line of succession would have been. And the fact that the royals are briefing directly to the son that the king wanted Beatrice and Eugenie to be there and wanted them to remain part of the family is obviously like a dagger in the heart to Harry and Meghan, who are desperately trying to get back into the fold.
Doria Ragland did not just attend that wedding. She held her daughter's hand on those chapel steps. She sat alone on the bride's side because there was no other Markle family member in that building. She flew across the world to watch her daughter marry into one of the most scrutinized institutions on the planet, and she did it with grace and with visible emotion, and with a quiet dignity that the cameras captured repeatedly throughout the day. 8 years later, that woman does not appear in a single frame of her daughter's anniversary post. That is a specific kind of hurt, and it is the kind of hurt that does not stay quiet forever. And King Charles, a man who, by any fair account, extended an act of genuine personal kindness on that wedding day, is also nowhere in the carousel. Whatever has happened between Charles and Harry in the years since, whatever negotiations have broken down, whatever letters have gone unanswered or meetings have not happened, none of that changes what Charles did on the 19th of May, 2018. He stepped in, he showed up, he walked her down that aisle. And in Meghan's official anniversary memorial of that day, he does not exist. The late Queen is gone now. She cannot see the carousel, but the people who knew her, the family she built, the institution she spent 70 years protecting, they can see it, and they are watching, and they are making their own quiet decisions about guest lists and invitations, and who gets counted in. That is the real story underneath all of this. Not just the carousel, not just the podcast contradiction, not just the Kemble wedding guest list. It is the accumulation of all of it, year after year, post after post, interview after interview, building into a picture of two people who have systematically burned through the relationships that once surrounded them and are now operating in a social landscape that looks very different from the one they started with. The Clooneys are at King Charles's charity events. The Beckhams are photographed with William and Catherine. Oprah has gone quiet. Serena has cooled. The cousins are getting married without them. The king is hosting without them. The working royals are rebuilding their profiles without them. And in Montecito, the response to all of that is a carefully curated carousel of solo dancing shots and a bronze penguin. There is something almost poetic about the bronze penguin, actually. Bronze for the 8th anniversary.
You are going to make a candle that smells like your children. First of all, hello, pedo bait. Second of all, they merged the Queen when she came out with Princess Lilibet candle. Then, of course, due to the backlash, she took it back. And now, of course, the press release says, the candle is in honor of our founder's daughter, Lilibet. Whereas we all have the original press release. So she merged the Queen, she merged her kids, and now she's merging her wedding. Of course she is. It's just natural.
Lifelong partnership as the symbolic meaning. A gift chosen to signal permanence and commitment. And yet it appears in the post meant to celebrate that lifelong partnership is one of the most solitary anniversary tributes you will ever see from someone with 4.5 million followers. Lifelong partnership, announced to the world, with almost no one else in the frame. Tom Sykes called it squandered goodwill. Boshoff called it a curation that tells its own story. Both framings are accurate. But what sits underneath both of them is something simpler and more human than either of those analytical frames can quite capture. This is what it looks like when the room empties out. Not all at once. Not with drama or confrontation or a single defining moment. Just gradually, quietly, one non-invitation at a time until the anniversary post has 24 photographs and almost nobody left in them who was actually there. 8 years ago, Meghan Markle walked into St. George's Chapel, watched by 600 guests, billions of television viewers, and the entire world press. The guest list read like a who's who of celebrity, royalty, and global influence. The family that received her was one of the most powerful institutions in the world. The moment was historic. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. 8 years later, the memorial of that day fits in a carousel. One Elton John, several solo shots, a bronze penguin, and the 600 people who stood in that chapel, the mother, the king, the queen, the family, the friends quietly absent from the frame. That is the arc. That is what the numbers actually add up to. And the 6th of June is going to add one more data point to that arc, a church in Kemble, full of family, moving forward without them. So drop your verdict in the comments right now. Should Meghan have included her mother in those 24 photographs? Was Doria's absence a privacy call, or does it say something deeper about where that relationship actually stands? And what do you think Harry genuinely thinks about his children being posted to the platform he publicly condemned? Because that podcast clip is not going away, and neither is the carousel. Those two things are going to sit next to each other for a very long time, and the distance between them is getting harder to explain. If this gave you something to think about, hit that like button. It genuinely helps get this in front of more people who are following this story closely. Share it with someone who has been watching this situation unfold, because this conversation is much bigger than one anniversary post. Subscribe if you are not already here, because this story is nowhere near finished and the 6th of June is just around the corner. You do not want to miss what comes next. See you in the next one.